Hello everyone. Welcome back to the Bedtime Tales channel, where mysterious and historical stories come alive at night. Tonight we journey into ancient Egypt to reveal why being a pharaoh wasn't as glorious as you might think. Don't forget to click like and subscribe first so you won't miss any more magical tales. Now, get your blanket ready, turn off the lights, and let's begin our bedtime story. On a quiet night in Thebes, beneath a dark sky sprinkled with stars and the looming silhouettes of pyramids, a 9-year-old boy sat frozen atop a golden throne carved with hieroglyphs. His name was Nebmatra, crown prince who had suddenly become Pharaoh Amenhotep IV after his father, King Amenhotep III, passed away unexpectedly. His small hands trembled under the weight of the crown forced upon his head, and his heart pounded not with pride, but with a deep fear. Around him, priests in white linen robes stood solemnly, faces unreadable, awaiting the new god king's first command. Yet in Nebmatra's mind echoed his mother, Queen Tai's comforting words from childhood. When sandstorms battered the palace courtyard, "You must be strong, my son. This nation depends on you." Those words stabbed at the boy's soul. For all he truly wanted was to play with kittens and have someone hold him. When he was afraid of the darkness, the duties and responsibilities awaiting him far surpassed any child's imagination. At dawn, he was summoned to the Grand Hall to sign documents, trade treaties with Nubia, rulings on irrigation canals in the Nile Delta, grain distributions for starving farmers. Each stroke of his brush sealed fates he could neither change nor fully understand. If he refused, they would brand him disobedient to the gods. If he rushed, his mistakes could bring famine, revolt, or the wrath of angry seers. Behind silk curtains shielding the populace's view, Nebmatra could only hang his head, choke back tears, and pray someone would teach him how to be a merciful deity instead of a terrifying despot. Night after night, the sacred cleansing ritual commenced. The high priest bathed him in lotus-scented waters and chanted ancient incantations to purge any taint of sin. Yet beneath this solemn ceremony, the palace grew colder and more oppressive. The handmaidens never smiled, the guards stood at rigid attention, and the counselors whispered behind thin veils about political maneuvers no child could grasp. Nebmatra learned quickly silence was his only shield. One wrong word could be deemed an insult to Horus, the falcon god who protected the realm. One careless gesture, a rejection of Isis, the goddess who guaranteed the land's fertility. When sleep finally came, it carried nightmares. In his dreams, the towering pyramids collapsed into dust, the Nile dried to cracked red earth, and gods with animal heads glared at him from the darkness. Each time he awoke to breathless panic, he dared to whisper, "Is this a sign that my kingdom will fall?" But the moment passed, replaced by the harsh voices of palace sentries. "Do not speak of dreams, Your Majesty. Reality awaits." He had no way to know whether these visions were warnings, curses, or simply the tortured reflections of a child forced into a divine role. One particularly lonely night, Nebmatra wandered the palace's hidden corridors until he reached a statue of Bastet. Tucked beneath it was a papyrus scroll. With trembling fingers, he unrolled it and found words not in hieroglyphs, but in strange, foreign characters. To the future pharaoh who feels alone, you are not the first, and you will not be the last. Power isolates, power deceives, but deep within you lies a light that must not die. From one who wore the crown before you. Who had written this? A rebellious priest, a secret tutor, or perhaps the spirit of a past pharaoh seeking a worthy successor? Nebmatra's heart swelled with wonder and dread. He realized he was part of a timeless lineage, whose burdens stretched beyond walls of stone and riverbanks of fertile mud. The next day, The palace became a stage. Soldiers paraded the boy king through the gates, littering his path with flowers as the people of Thebes cheered. Seated on a golden litter, Nebmatra fought the urge to be sick. He wanted to dash after butterflies across the courtyard, not glide in a gilded cage. Under the gaze of thousands, he felt like a puppet performing for an audience that loved and feared him in equal measure. He learned that applause can be just another shackle. Every forced smile, every beat of the drum demanded perfection, even as his young heart ached for the carefree laughter of childhood. After the procession, priest advisors led him into a hidden chamber to read prophecies whether the Nile's flood would come, if the harvest would be bountiful or doomed, even how long his reign might last. Nebmatra listened, counting the seconds until he could return to his private sanctum. Yet he understood there was no true home for a pharaoh. His life was an endless cycle of rituals, as though fate itself were etched into Egypt's eternal stones. As dusk settled once more, Nebmatra wept quietly as he wrote a single word using hieroglyphs. In his secret journal, longing. Longing was his only refuge from the strange reality that had ensnared him. He longed for childhood friends, for playing ball woven from palm fronds, for hearing kittens scamper in the palace gardens. But he could never voice that longing publicly. To do so would be to admit a pharaoh's weakness. Thus, his yearning became a silent prayer echoing only in the shadows. Before sleep claimed him, Nebmatra climbed to the highest balcony of the palace and gazed at the stars drifting over the desert. A cool breeze carried a whispered question, "Will tomorrow be any different?" He bowed his head and murmured, "O Ra, if I am truly your child, grant me strength to protect my people, not terrify them. Guide me so that the light in my heart endures." From below, drums and chants extolled the pharaoh in a never-ending anthem. Yet for the boy on the balcony, the most beautiful sound was the fragile hope blooming quietly within him. Such was the first real night of Nebmatra's reign, the night he discovered that even a radiant crown can eclipse the gentlest light of the heart. His long journey was only beginning, fraught with political storms, tests of faith, and an unexpected love that would one day transform him from a god-king into a true human being. The dawn of the festival of Osiris broke over Thebes like molten gold spilling across the desert. Nebmatra, the 9-year-old pharaoh, awoke before the first light crept over the horizon. His small body stirred beneath layers of fine linen sheets, heart pounding with both curiosity and dread. Today was not merely another ritual. It was the greatest celebration of death and rebirth in all Egypt, a commemoration of Osiris, lord of the underworld and harbinger of eternal life. For a mortal child, the symbolism was dizzying. Death meant sacrifice, rebirth meant change, and both hovered in the air like the scent of incense. In the courtyard outside his private chambers, rows of priests in emerald-dipped robes awaited him. Their faces, masked in solemnity, bore the painted eye of Horus. A single misstep in the ceremony could be interpreted as a disastrous omen. Nebmatra swallowed hard, recalling the comforting words of the mysterious papyrus, "Power isolates, power deceives, but deep within you lies a light that must not die." He clutched the scroll hidden in his tunic, allowing its promise to steal his resolve dot as he emerged. Trembling onto the dais, the trumpets blared. Mourners, volunteers playing the role of distraught widows of Osiris fell to their knees and wept in staged hysteria. Nebmatra watched, unsettled by how easily grief and celebration intertwined. Beyond the theatrics, he sensed a darker undercurrent. Whispered political messages disguised as sacred lament. Noble families, locked in rivalries, used the festival to sway public favor. He glanced to his right, where Vizier Pazer and General Horemheb exchanged taut glances. Their silent exchange reminded him that even death could be weaponized. The tableau shifted. The priests formed a processional behind a gilded shrine, bearing the carved likeness of Osiris, green-skinned, crowned with the white atef. The incense floated on the warm morning breeze, curling around Nemetrae's ankles like ethereal serpents. With each step, the priests intoned, "Kent Amentu, guide us through the realm of the dead," their voices rising and falling like the tides of the Nile. Neb-Matra felt the weight of eternity pressing upon his young shoulders. He wondered, was he merely a puppet in their sacred dance? At the riverbank, long columns of reed barges waited. On the lead boat stood Neb-Matrae's mother, Queen Tai, resplendent in a gown spun from the finest Egyptian cotton, her eyes alight with both pride and worry. Tai reached out, touching her son's hand, and Neb-Matra squeezed back. Finding solace in the brief contact, behind them, the priests lifted the god's shrine onto a larger barge, carved to resemble a lotus symbol of rebirth, its petals sculpted in ivory and gold. As the flotilla pushed off, the sacred chant morphed into a triumphant hymn, announcing Osiris's return to the living world. The current bore them eastward, toward the precinct of Abydos, where the great Assyrian temple stood. Along the banks, commoners and nobles alike cheered, scattering fresh garlands of blue and yellow flowers onto the water. Neb-Matra peered over the railing, entranced by the spectacle. Women beating small drums, elders chanting verses of the myth, children releasing miniature paper boats, each carrying a drawn offering for the god. For a moment, he felt normal, just another onlooker in a sea of devotion. But the moment passed as he remembered his crown, the sacred duty that set him apart. Upon arrival, the barge docked at a causeway flanked by colossal statues of Osiris and Isis. Neb-Matra disembarked alongside his mother and was led into the hypostyle hall, where flickering torches created dancing shadows on the papyrus columns. Here, in the temple's heart, the high priest awaited, his head shaven and eyes lined with kohl. In his hand, he held a golden scepter topped with the symbol of the pillar, the backbone of Osiris, representing stability and endurance. He approached Neb-Matra and presented it to the boy king. "Your Majesty," the priest intoned, "you bear witness to the death of Osiris and his resurrection. May your reign mirror this sacred cycle. When darkness falls, may you rise stronger." Neb-Matra accepted the scepter, its cool metal against his palm both reassuring and frightening. He understood the message. He must endure trials, political scheming, threats of rebellion, the caprices of nature, and emerge triumphant. But could his young heart withstand such shadows? The ritual climaxed when the priests enacted Osiris's murder. Actors portraying Set, the jealous brother, grappled with a figure draped in white. With a harrowing cry, they killed him, thrusting impaled spears into his form. The crowd gasped. Some wept. Neb-Matrae's stomach churned. Death, simulated so vividly, brought the ceremony too close to reality. His gaze flicked to the stage's edge, where masked soldiers observed, ensuring order. The line between performance and truth blurred. Then came the moment of rebirth. Isis, portrayed by the temple's chief acolyte, emerged, gathering Osiris's scattered body parts. She performed the rites of resurrection, breathing life back into the fallen god. As she raised him, a beam of midday sun pierced the temple's skylight, illuminating the figure in brilliant light. A roar of exultation rose, rippling through the throng. Neb-Matra felt an almost tangible surge beneath his feet, as if the earth itself reaffirmed its covenant with the divine. Despite the grandeur, a nagging doubt tugged at Neb-Matra. In the hushed corridors afterwards, the priests congratulated one another on flawlessly staging the festival. Officers spoke in low tones of troop movements along the northern border, of grain shortages looming near Kush, even as Osiris symbolically triumphed over death, the reality of Cairo's precarious food supplies. The encroachment of rival kingdoms and tempers flaring in the palace reminded him that real battles awaited. He began to understand the true cost of power, performing divinity on the surface, while wrestling with human crises underneath. That evening, as torches guttered and the sky turned a bruised purple, a grand feast was laid out in the open court. Table upon table groaned under roasted duck, spiced figs, flatbreads, and sweet lotus cakes. Nebmatra sat beside his mother, flanked by Pazer and Horemheb. Queen Tyre raised a goblet of pomegranate wine, toasting the festival's success, too. "Our young pharaoh," she declared, "may you grow as Osiris has grown never renewed." The assembled cheers echoed against stone walls, and Nebmatra managed a small smile, lifting his cup with trembling fingers. Yet as he ate, he felt the weight of all eyes upon him. Noble children darted glances his way, some with genuine admiration, others with envy sharp as broken pottery. He realized this feast was also a contest. Who could curry his favor? Servants whispered, juggling heaping platters, watching his expressions. Every bite was a performance, every sip a test. And in that moment, Nebmatra longed to abandon his golden seat, to slip unnoticed into the night and lose himself among ordinary folk. His chance came unexpectedly. A commotion at the western gate drew his attention. A hooded figure had slipped past the guards and knelt before him. The crowd parted. The figure lowered their hood, revealing a slender woman with eyes as bright as obsidian. In her hand she clutched a small papyrus sealed with unfamiliar symbols. "Your Majesty," she whispered, offering the scroll. "I bring a message." Before any guard could react, Nebmatra stood and gently took the message. The woman bowed and vanished into the shadows. Alarmed guards surged forward, but Queen Tyre raised a calming hand. "Let him read it," she commanded softly. "Some messages must be delivered by stealth." Alone in the dimly lit corridor, Nebmatra broke the seal. His breath caught as he read the same foreign handwriting from the statue of Bastet. "Festival of death, festival of rebirth both mirror the cycle within you. But beware, not all rebirth is triumph. Some awakenings bring ruin. Seek the house of life at dawn. There you will find truths that even gods fear." His pulse thundered. The house of life was the great library and school of healing and magic. What truth could be so terrifying that gods would dread it? He folded the papyrus carefully and tucked it into his robes. The festival's final torch fires crackled in the courtyard below, illuminating the stone release of Osiris's triumph. Nebmatra stared at that scene, heart heavy with foreboding. If the god of resurrection feared some truth, then what dread awaited a mere child? That night, as torches guttered and the palace sank into uneasy slumber, Nebmatra lay awake. The day's pageantry had been a hollow echo if hidden threats and secrets lurked beneath. Holding the papyrus close, he whispered into the darkness, "Give me courage, O Ra. Grant me sight beyond ceremony, wisdom beyond age." The words were small, barely more than a breath. Yet in that silence, Nebmatra felt a seed of resolve take root. His journey would not end with staged death and triumphant resurrection. Tomorrow, at the House of Life, he would step beyond the role of puppet ruler and seek the knowledge that could liberate his people and perhaps himself from the gilded cage of divine illusion. And so closed the festival of Osiris, not with a single jubilant note, but with a question hanging in the night air. What truths would the young pharaoh uncover at dawn? And would they illuminate his path, or plunge him into deeper darkness? Before dawn's first light painted the desert sky, Nebmatra slipped from his chamber. Guided by the waxen torch he held close against the chill, the grand corridors of the palace lay hushed, broken only by the distant clatter of a lone guard's patrol. In his robes, he carried the Small papyrus from the mysterious messenger, its warning urgent and unyielding. Seek the house of life at dawn. There you will find truths that even gods fear. The house of life, or Parank, was the heart of Egypt's ancient wisdom, a vast library and sanctuary where healers, scribes, and priests preserved knowledge of medicine, magic, astronomy, and the sacred rites of the gods. Few pharaohs ever ventured its inner sanctums, for its treasures were jealously guarded, and its secrets could unravel delicate balances of power. Yet for Nebmatra, whose heart trembled with questions, it beckoned like a lantern in the night. As the sky lightened to a deep indigo, he reached the outer walls of the House of Life. Massive limestone pillars carved with hieroglyphs of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, loomed before him. Only a handful of acolytes stirred in the courtyard, tending to clay jars of pigments and bundles of papyrus reeds. Nebmatra pulled his hood down, lowering his torch so as not to betray his rank. Approaching the low wooden door marked with the Eye of Horus, he hesitated. Behind those walls lay knowledge that could liberate his kingdom or destroy it. He let the door creak open and slipped inside. The interior was cool and dim. High vaulted ceilings draped with tapestries. Long tables strewn with scrolls, vials of herb extracts, and obsidian writing palettes. At the center stood a massive stone pedestal crowned by a carved falcon's wings. On it lay the Book of Hidden Names, a revered tome rumored to hold the secret true names of gods and mortals alike, names that, when spoken, could bind a deity or reveal a soul's deepest fears. Nebmatra's breath caught. This was knowledge few mortals dared seek. From the shadows, a soft voice spoke. "The dawn comes, your majesty." Nebmatra turned to see Senemet, the chief librarian and master of the Parank. His eyes glowed faintly in the torchlight behind his mask of polished bronze. Senemet was both revered and feared, a man whose loyalty to the gods was said to eclipse loyalty to any pharaoh. Nebmatra welcomed him with a curt nod. "I have questions," he said, voice low. "Questions about power, about destiny, and about truths hidden since before the first pyramid stone was set." Senemet's mask tilted as if in quiet amusement. "The House of Life grants knowledge freely, but it demands responsibility in return. What you seek may change you, my king." He gestured to a narrow corridor where lanterns sputtered. "Follow me." They passed dusty shelves bearing thousands of scrolls, each sealed with red clay stamps of approval. The air smelled of aged papyrus and lotus oil. Senemet paused before a bronze-bound door sealed with blue faience beads. "Behind this door," he whispered, "lies the chamber of scrolls, texts forbidden to all but the pharaoh." With a soft chant, he traced symbols in the air. The beads glowed, and the door swung open silently. Inside, low benches surrounded a stone dais. On it, Nebmatra saw scrolls labeled on rituals of renewal, secrets of immortality, names of the unnamed. His pulse quickened. "These," Senemet said, "hold both the medicine to heal and the poison to destroy. You must choose carefully which you read." Nebmatra's fingers hovered over the nearest scroll. "The Ritual of True Sight." According to legend, it granted the seer the ability to perceive a person's hidden nature, truth, or deception by invoking the Eye of Thoth, a power that could unmask traitors. But it came with a cost. The seer's own illusions would shatter, leaving the soul exposed and vulnerable. He hesitated, heart pounding. In the hushed chamber, the weight of his ancestors' expectations pressed upon him. Every pharaoh before him had wielded power through grand ceremonies and armies. But he, this child who trembled beneath his crown, longed to see his people's true hearts, to know which ministers were honest, which generals bore hidden ambitions, and whether the gods themselves were friend or foe. He unrolled the scroll. The script flowed like water across the papyrus, instructions for chanting, Ingredients for a sacred ink infused with lotus petals, mandrake root, and extracts of lapis lazuli. Sentiment watched in silence as Nebmatra assembled ink from jars. On a nearby shelf, his small hands shook, yet he pressed on, grinding the mandrake and mixing powders with lotus water. Each ingredient released a scent that made his head swim with anticipation and fear. When the ink was ready, he dipped a fine, reed stylus and inscribed the 3 sacred glyphs, the symbol of the eye, the moon's crescent, and the feather of Maat, goddess of truth. As he finished, the glyphs glowed faintly, and the air seemed to hum. Sentiment nodded. "Speak the incantation." Nebmatra closed his eyes and spoke in a hushed voice. "Eye of Thoth, pierce the veils of shadow. Grant me sight beyond mortal. Ken, reveal the hearts that beat in falsehood, and let truth rise, though illusions end." Suddenly, the chamber lights flickered. The air turned thick, as though the walls themselves leaned closer. Nebmatra felt his vision sharpen, colors intensified, shadows receded, and in that moment, he sensed something in Sentiment's gaze, not approval, but calculation. He opened his eyes, ready to see the librarian's heart. Sentiment's masked face appeared unchanged, but Nebmatra perceived a flicker, a desire to guard the scrolls at any cost, even if it meant betraying the young king. A heartbeat later, the illusion slipped, and the mask's bronze surface grew cold and distant. Nebmatra recoiled, realizing that Sentiment had hidden more than forgotten scrolls. He had concealed ambitions. Before Nebmatra could speak, Sentiment bowed low and turned away. The glyphs on the days faded. "You have seen true sight's burden. Use it sparingly, Pharaoh. Knowledge is a double blade." He departed, leaving Nebmatra alone in the silent chamber, heart racing with the promise and peril of what he had learned. As he retraced his steps through the labyrinth of shelves, Nebmatra pondered. If he distrusted his own librarian, whom could he trust? Even his beloved Queen Tai had urged caution. He knew the weight of prophecy. Knowledge could free his kingdom from famine, defeat enemies, and end corruption, but it could also ignite fear, breed paranoia, and fracture alliances, emerging into dawn's pale light. He returned to the palace just as the morning trumpets sounded. No one seemed to notice his late arrival. The festival's aftermath had left the court weary and subdued. Nebmatra slipped back into his private chambers, heart heavy, and poured himself a small cup of barley water. He traced the papyrus's final line with a finger. Some awakenings bring ruin. All day, he moved through audiences and councils, like a shadow among flames. He used true sight sparingly once to discern whether the Nubian envoy's plea for greater irrigation rights stemmed from genuine need or cunning politics. Once to read the hearts of his own generals, confirming who remained loyal. Each revelation cut him like a blade, betrayal by those he trusted, honest devotion from unexpected corners. By dusk, his spirit sagged. He ascended to the rooftop terrace, where a gentle breeze carried the scent of date palms in the fading light. He examined the world anew, the twisting river veins of the Nile, the fields that would soon yield grain, the clay rooftops of ordinary houses shimmering in sunset. He thought of the people whose lives hinged on his decisions. The power to see their hidden truths felt both awe-inspiring and crushing. Closing his eyes, Nebmatra whispered into the wind, "Help me, O Thoth. Grant me wisdom to wield what I have learned without becoming the monster I seek to tame." For a moment, the stars seemed to flicker and align in response. He opened his eyes, resolve glowing within. Tomorrow, he would meet with Queen Tai and reveal the truths he had uncovered. He would demand reforms redistributing granaries to starving villages, purging corrupt officials, and instituting councils of genuine counsel. He would strive to be not a god on a distant throne, but a shepherd among his sheep. Yet he understood that each choice carried risk. Revolution could breed chaos. Mercy could invite treachery. As the first stars peeked through the early night sky, Nebmatra laid aside the papyrus and the scroll of true sight. He removed his crown, placing it gently on a velvet cushion. In its gold and lapis inlay, he saw not power, but the weight of a promise to rule not through illusion or fear, but through the enduring light of truth, and to guard that light against the shadows that forever loomed in the halls of power. Thus closed the third night of his reign, a night of revelations, burdens, and resolve, setting the stage for a fledgling pharaoh determined to reshape Egypt's destiny, one fragile truth at a time. The morning sun broke over Thebes with a gentle glow, painting the limestone walls of the palace in honeyed light. Nebmatra, now a boy of 10 summers yet weighed by responsibilities far beyond his years, rose before dawn. His dreams had been restless visions of cracked granaries, starving villagers at the riverbank, and the cold, accusing eyes of those he had exposed with his true sight. He shivered, not from the cool air, but from the memory of secrets best kept hidden. He donned a simple white tunic beneath his ceremonial robe, an intentional choice, for today he would make his first public reforms. With the papyrus of revelations tucked inside his breast, he walked the courtyard toward the hall of councils. The buzz of activity was already a low hum. Scribes unrolled parchments, heralds polished bronze horns, and soldiers prepared to escort him through the city to the great granaries. Queen Time met him at the entrance, her dark eyes bright with pride and concern. In her hands she carried two decrees, one to redistribute surplus grain to villages ravaged by drought, the other to place key granaries under direct royal oversight, bypassing corrupt satraps. Nebmatra's heart pounded as he accepted them. The decision would feed thousands, but it would also strip power from established elites. He sensed the currents of dissent coiling like serpents beneath the palace stones. Inside the hall of councils, Vizier Pazer and General Horemheb sat arrayed opposite the boy king. Pazer's thin lips pressed into a tight line, while Horemheb's stern features betrayed nothing. Nebmatra cleared his throat, voice steady despite the tremor within. Today, we write a new chapter for Egypt. Hunger stalks our people. I have seen, with my own eyes, the suffering in the villages. Therefore I issue these royal decrees. Surplus grain from the temple granaries is to be sent at once to famine-stricken regions, and all future harvests will be stored under the guardianship of the crown to be distributed by my direct order. A hush fell. Scribes poised their reed pens, ready to record history. Pazer rose, bowing with a measured grace. Your Majesty's compassion honors the gods, he intoned. Yet in his gaze was a flicker and ember of resistance. Horemheb merely nodded, his mind already shifting to logistics and troop movements. Asterisk as the court dispersed to enact the edicts, Nebmatra followed his mother through winding corridors to the royal stables, where his chariot awaited. The polished wheels gleamed like new copper, and the horses stamped impatiently. He climbed aboard, heart thunderous, and the guards fell in behind. Their escort filed through the grand gate and into the dusty streets of Thebes, where commoners paused in their morning chores to watch the pharaoh pass. Nebmatra raised his hand in greeting, offering a rare, genuine smile. He saw flower-faced bakers pause in mid-need, children set aside clay dolls, and elders bow on stooped knees. Yet as the chariot rolled forward, he noticed other glances. The tight-loomed robes of wealthy merchants, the cold stares of temple functionaries, and the hurried whisperings between guards at each intersection. Not all welcomed change. They arrived at the great granaries on the river's west bank, where massive stone bins rose like fortress walls. Here, Pazer and Horemheb met them, flanking the pharaoh as he stepped onto the platform. A steady stream of palace scribes recorded each word. By my authority as son of Ra, Nebmatra proclaimed, let these silos open to feed the hungry. Let no family be left to starve while grain rots in storehouses. He gestured, and the granary doors clanged open. A great rumble echoed as wheat poured down stone chutes into waiting baskets. Workers cheered, and fair-haired children danced at the golden rain of grain. But at the crowd's edge stood a silent figure. High Priest Amenhotep, his fire red, robes bright as molten lava. His face was pale under the crimson coal, and his eyes narrowed as he surveyed the scene. He had long controlled temple granaries and the tithes of farmers, using famine as leverage to extract wealth and loyalty. Nemetra's decree struck at the heart of his power. Amenhotep bowed stiffly. Your mercy, may the gods bless your generosity. Yet in his voice lay steel. Nebmatra met his gaze, resolved not to flinch. He knew that priest held both secrets and influence, a dangerous combination. With the first baskets of wheat dispatched to southern villages, Nebmatra and his retinue returned to the palace. But instead of relief, he felt the first sting of unease. The courts and corridors buzzed once more, not with praise, but with rumor and agitation. He heard servants whisper of reckless giving, challenging the priests, and weakening Egypt's traditions. That night, sleep refused him. He sat alone on the rooftop terrace, moonlight bathing the Nile in silver. He traced the papyrus's script again. Some awakenings bring ruin. Was he awakening Egypt to a brighter dawn, or summoning storms he could not control? As he pondered, a familiar hush fell over the terrace. From the shadows emerged Neferer, his half-sister and confidant. Though only 8, she possessed the keen intuition of a fox. She smelled of hyacinth and carried a small clay statuette of Bastet. I heard, she said softly, that you stole grain from the temple. Her eyes glowed with curiosity, not reproach. Nebmatra sighed. I took enough to save lives. If we had waited for the priests, children would have died. Nefer placed her hand on his arm. The priests will not forget. They may speak against you tomorrow in assembly. He nodded. He had anticipated backlash. I will face them, he said, voice firm. But I need allies. Nefer smiled for the first time that night. Then you shall have mine. She handed him the statuette. Bastet protects the vulnerable. Keep her close. He cradled the small cat goddess, feeling warmth spread through his chest. In that moment, he resolved he would stand by his people, no matter the cost. The next morning, the Hall of Divine Assembly, a gathering of priests, nobles, and bearers of title filled with chanting voices. High Priest Amenhotep led the ceremony. Invoking Osiris and Amun-Ra, Nebmatra sat on his elevated seat, flanked by Tai and Horemheb. He felt each gaze piercing him, judging his recent actions. Amenhotep raised his voice. We give praise to the pharaoh for his mercy. Yet we must remember Egypt's balance. Grain stores safeguard both body and spirit. Reckless redistribution risks both our material stability and divine favor. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Nebmatra rose, his heart pounding. The room fell silent. High Priest, he said, voice echoing against stone columns. No balance exists when children starve. He held up a sap-green phylactery, an amulet inscribed with the Eye of Horus, signifying royal authority. By this symbol, I challenge any who would place tradition above life. Let us measure our devotion by action, not empty invocation. Guests rose. The assembly stirred. Some priests, while common nobles leaned forward with interest. Amenhotep's face darkened. He stepped down from his dais and advanced on the boy king. You overstep, young pharaoh. You threaten the sacred order. Nebuchadnezzar did not flinch. I protect Egypt's order. A kingdom of empty bellies will bow before famine, not the gods. Tension crackled like desert lightning. Suddenly, Tai placed a calming hand on her son's shoulder, and Horemheb stood, signaling the palace guards to hold their positions. No swords were drawn, yet the threat hung heavy in the air. At length, Amenhotep bowed stiffly. So be it. Your Majesty, let us pray that the gods accept your bold mercy. He turned and swept from the hall, red robes swirling like a departing storm. A tremor passed through the crowds and cheered. Others whispered anxiously. Nebuchadnezzar sat, pulse racing but proud. He had asserted his vision. A pharaoh's duty was to his people above all. In the days that followed, grain shipments reached far-flung villages, thanks to his direct oversight. The corruption that once diverted supplies to black markets was curtailed. Word spread of the boy king's compassion, and villagers sang praises to his name. Yet in the palace, the undercurrents of discontent only grew stronger. Pazer convened secret meetings with disaffected nobles. Amenhotep met with foreign emissaries, exploring alliances against the crown. Even Horemheb, loyal general though he was, eyed the shifting tides with concern. Would true order or chaos prevail? One night, Nebuchadnezzar awoke to muffled footsteps outside his door. Slipping from his bed, he crept to the entrance and recognized a familiar figure, Beketaman, a young palace guard he had once spared from punishment for a minor theft. Beketaman's eyes were wide with fear. Your Majesty, he whispered, they plan to arrest you at sunrise. They will claim you've broken divine law. Nebuchadnezzar's blood ran cold. Who? Pazer and Amenhotep, they have conspired. But I can help you escape to the temple at Karnak for sanctuary. The temple of Amun at Karnak was a place no conspirator dared violate. A refuge. Under divine protection, Nebuchadnezzar weighed his choices: flee and risk appearing weak, or stay and face a trial that would surely end in his removal. He glanced at the statuette of Bastet, hanging around his neck, Nefer's gift hand at the phylactery on his wrist. The divine symbols glowed faintly in the torchlight, as though urging him onward. I go, he said at last. Gather your men. Beketaman bowed and slipped away. Nebuchadnezzar returned to bed, mind racing. He knew the dawn would bring either his downfall or the start of a bold stand that could be his greatest triumph. Thus closed the fourth act of his reign, a chapter of mercy and power, of courage and conspiracy. As the young pharaoh set forth on a path where even gods might tremble, and where the fate of Egypt hung in the balance between duty and destiny. The night was at its deepest when Nebuchadnezzar slipped from the palace gates, guided only by the silver light of the waxing moon, clad in a plain linen tunic and hood that obscured his youthful features. He moved swiftly beside Beketaman and a handful of loyal guards. Their footsteps fell soft on the cool stone pavement as they made their way through the silent corridors of Thebes, past shuttered windows and posted sentries too accustomed to the palace's rhythms to notice a single absent echo. Nebuchadnezzar's pulse thundered in his ears. In his breast pocket, the papyrus from the House of Life lay folded, its warning and promise burning with fresh urgency. Should the conspirators capture him before sanctuary's walls, all would be lost. Egypt's hope for reform, his mother's proud gaze, and the fragile trust he had kindled with the people. Yet he pressed on, steeled by conviction and the knowledge that flight was not cowardice, but the first step toward justice. At last they reached the temple of Amun at Karnak, a forest of towering columns etched with hieroglyphs and crowned by carved lotus capitals. The massive gates stood open as if awaiting their approach. Beketaman raised his hand in salute to the temple guard, a silent code of protection, and they passed inside. Within the precincts, flickering torches cast long shadows across sacred pools. and the night air was redolent with incense. Nebmatra paused beneath the great hypostyle hall's cavernous ceiling, awed by its sheer scale. Here the gods themselves were said to dwell. He stepped forward, heart hammering, and proclaimed in a clear, resonant voice, I, Nebmatra, Pharaoh of Egypt, seek refuge in the house of Ammon. May the god of Thebes protect his chosen son. A drum echo answered from deep within the temple, and the guardian priests emerged, robes shimmering like starlight forming a protective circle around the young king. Word pulsed through the stone halls that the pharaoh had claimed sanctuary. Never had such a declaration been more urgent. Meanwhile, back at the palace, High Priest Amenhotep and Vizier Pazer discovered the empty bed and hastily written note by Divine Will, the pharaoh seeks Amen's protection. Pursuit dishonors the gods. Infuriated, they convened an emergency council. General Horemheb urged caution, warning that violating sanctuary could provoke public outrage and divine wrath. Yet Amenhotep snarled, let the temples be defiled, if necessary. This boy's foolish mercy upends the sacred order. Pazer nodded. We have no choice but to break sanctuary. Egypt's stability depends on his obedience. At Karnak, Nebmatra moved with his small entourage past side chapels and ritual altars. Queen Tai met him in the inner court, a vision of calm strength in her flowing gowns. Her dark eyes, shadowed by worry, softened when she saw her son. She embraced him tightly, whispering, You are safe here, my heart. Ammon shelters those he loves. Nebmatra nodded, but doubt flickered in his gaze. Mother, I am grateful, yet I fear this sanctuary cannot last. They will come. Tai placed a gentle hand on his cheek. Then we shall prepare. The people know your heart. Their voices will rise to defend you. Together, they entered the sanctum of Ammon-Ra, where sunlight from high windows slanted in long prisms. The priests led them to a sacred niche adorned with gold and lapis lazuli. A single statue of the god stood on its pedestal, arms outstretched in benediction. Tai and Nebmatra knelt, offering prayers and libations of censer smoke. In those moments, Nebmatra felt calm, descend an assurance that the gods had not abandoned him. Yet beyond the temple walls, the drums of war began to pound. Amenhotep marshaled temple soldiers, Pazer enlisted palace guards, and the city resounded with the clamor of arms. Within Karnak's precincts, news of the impending siege spread like wildfire. Commoners, farmers, artisans, merchants flocked to the temple gates, forming a sea of pleading faces, banners, and singing voices. They chanted Nebmatra's name, invoking Ammon's judgment on those who defiled sanctuary. The priests, moved by the people's fervor, reinforced their protective wards and prepared to bar any who sought to cross the sacred threshold. On the third dawn, Amenhotep's forces arrived at Karnak's outer courtyard. Temple soldiers stood firm behind the great pylons, javelins leveled at those who advanced. High Priest Amenhotep climbed onto a raised dais, red robes blazing in the early sun, and thundered an ultimatum. Pharaoh Nebmatra, abandon this false mercy and return to the palace, lest you bring ruin upon the land and anger the true gods. From within, Nebmatra emerged, crowned yet radiant in his simple linen robes. His eyes, once unsure, flamed with purpose. He raised his voice, echoing through Karnak's halls, People of Egypt, you know my heart. I stand by the living, not by hollow rites that starve our children. If the gods truly will famine as punishment, then let me face that fate. But if Ammon and the people stand with justice and mercy, let this temple's walls hold firm. A roar erupted from priests, commoners, and even some temple soldiers. The ground trembled with their unity. Amenhotep's lips tightened as he saw the tide had turned. The sacred law forbade bloodshed within Karnak's walls. His soldiers hesitated. Pazer gripped his staff of office, realizing his careful plans had unraveled. Night fell with tension unresolved. Both sides braced, awaiting the verdict of the gods and the people. In the temple's inner sanctum, Nebmatra and Tai consulted with Senemet, the librarian whose loyalty had been tested by true sight. He revealed the last scroll from his secret chamber, the Edict of Divine Council, proclaiming that any god's child claiming sanctuary could not be seized without the high priest's confession of falsehood, and that false accusations before the people nullified his authority. Armed with this knowledge, Nebmatra prepared for the next dawn's gathering. The following morning, the courtyard filled with tens of thousands. Pazer and Amenhotep ascended to denounce the pharaoh. Yet before they could speak, Nebmatra stepped forward, unrolled the edict on a polished granite slab, and read it aloud. No child of the gods may be torn from holy sanctuary by earthly hands alone. The high priest who claims falsehood must testify before the people. False counsel betrays the gods. A hush fell. Amenhotep's face turned ashen, for the edict named him. The crowd rallied behind Nebmatra's call for divine justice. Under immense pressure, Amenhotep was forced to kneel and swear an oath of innocence or face exile. Pazer, realizing the tide had irrevocably turned, knelt beside him, relinquishing his staff. In that moment, sanctuary held. Karnak's walls stood unbroken, and Nebmatra emerged not as a fugitive, but as a ruler validated by divine and popular will. The conspirators were stripped of titles and exiled to desert outposts. Their supporters faced trials before local councils. Yet victory bore its own sorrow. Tai placed a protective arm around her son. "You have done well, my pharaoh," she whispered. "But know that power's trials are far from over." Nebmatra nodded, gazing out across the throng of loyal faces. The path he had chosen, one of mercy and truth, had exacted a heavy price. But as the morning sun bathed Karnak in golden light, he felt the promise of a new Egypt, one where the gods' decrees and the people's needs walked hand in hand, and where even a child king could bend the currents of history. Thus closed the 5th chapter, a tale of sanctuary, rebellion, and the forging of a pharaoh's resolve amidst the whispers of betrayal. The sun rose over Thebes on the 6th day of Nebmatra's reign, like a promise freshly forged in gold. Word of his triumph at Karnak had spread upriver, carried by boatmen and caravan guides, and reached the ears of neighboring kings, the Nubian monarchs to the south, the Hittites across the northern mountains, even the distant rulers of the city-states. In the Levant, some cheered the rise of a young, just pharaoh. Others whispered that Egypt, still healing from years of famine and palace intrigue, was vulnerable to outside ambition. Nebmatra stood on the balcony of the palace's eastern wing, overlooking the bustling harbor on the Nile's east bank. Barges laden with grain from his redistributed stores drifted downstream, while traders in colorful robes unloaded amphorae of olive oil and cedar wood. He watched the scene with cautious pride, aware that true security for Egypt lay not just in internal reform, but in forging alliances beyond her borders. Queen Tai joined him, her presence a calm anchor. "The Nubian envoy arrives today," she said softly. "He seeks an audience and offers tribute, but also warns of growing restlessness among his own nobles. If grain flows too freely," Nebmatra nodded. "We saved lives, mother, but we must show strength as well as mercy. Let us greet him with honor, yet remind him Egypt's prosperity is the result of Pharaoh's will, not foreign supplication." They descended into the grand audience hall, where ornate columns of alabaster and sandstone rose to a vaulted ceiling, painted with depictions of the sun god's daily journey. At the far end, a dais draped in royal blue awaited the Nubian emissary. Prince Kashada stood flanked by his guards, their skin the color of rich mahogany and their braids adorned with ivory beads. Behind him, chieftains murmured in Nubian tongues. Nebmatra took his seat and greeted Kashada with a respectful bow. Prince Kashada, welcome to Thebes. May our peoples share in peace and plenty. The Nubian spoke through his interpreter. Great Pharaoh, your mercy has fed our hungry, but our fields still languish in drought's shadow. If Egypt's granaries remain open to all, my people's faith in me will endure. Nebmatra folded his hands. Egypt will continue to share her bounty. In return, you shall supply Egyptian artisans with ebony and gold. Let this partnership bind our realms through commerce and friendship. Kashada's eyes gleamed. It is as you decree. I will send a caravan of ivory and gold to Thebes within the month. I only ask that Egypt dispatches engineers to help build new canals in Nubia, so that our lands may flourish as yours have. The queen smiled. A wise request. We shall send our chief architect and a team of surveyors. Together, we will turn desert sands to fertile fields. Outside the hall, palace scribes recorded every word. The alliance was sealed with the exchange of scarab-shaped seals dipped in red ochre. Prince Kashada bowed deeply and withdrew, leaving behind an intricate gift, a carved ebony statuette of Mak, the Nubian lion god of war, symbolizing strength and vigilance. As the Nubian retinue departed, Nebmatra reflected on the delicate balance of diplomacy. He had quelled internal conspiracies with the House of Life's edict. Now he must navigate foreign courts where ambition lurked behind every ornate banquet and embroidered robe. Later that afternoon, a second envoy arrived, a delegation from the Hittite king. These men were taller, with fair hair and stern features. Their tunics embroidered with falcons and sun discs. They bore gifts of copper ingots, wore chariots' yoke fittings, and a finely woven banner depicting two sun discs entwined. Yet beneath the presents lay an unspoken question. Would Egypt ally itself with Hatti against shared foes, or remain focused on her own recovery? Nebmatra received the Hittite ambassadors with measured courtesy. Honored guests from Hatti, your king's offerings are most generous. Egypt will consider your desire for military partnership. But first, let us strengthen ties through cultural exchange. Our scribes and your bards shall share knowledge of history and law. Only then can we build foundations for joint defense. The Hittite leader, a grizzled veteran named Piamaradu, inclined his head. Let it be so, Pharaoh. We welcome scholars and artisans who seek the greatest libraries of the world. Nebmatra rose from his throne and clasped Piamaradu's extended hand. Then let our people learn from each other's wisdom, so that when war comes, we stand as brothers. A ripple of approval passed through the court. Later that evening, in the privacy of his solar chamber, Nebmatra unfurled the papyrus from the House of Life and studied its cryptic final line once more. Seek the balance between heart and crown, for without it, both may shatter. He realized that success in diplomacy required precisely that balance: compassion to build trust, and authority to command respect. The following dawn, he convened his inner council, Queen Tai, General Horemheb, and Sentiment, the librarian. He reviewed the Nubian and Hittite agreements and asked, have we secured any obligations that might hamper Egypt's sovereignty? Horemheb spoke first. The Nubian request for engineers is beneficial. Their loyalty will be cemented by shared canal projects. The Hittites' cultural exchange is sagacious. Yet we must guard against military pacts that drag us into their conflicts too deeply. Sentiment, adjusting his bronze mask, added, knowledge flows both ways. We must ensure our scrolls and magical practices are not misused. I recommend we establish a dedicated school of diplomacy compiled by our greatest scribes to codify treaties and rituals of alliance. Nebmatra nodded. So it shall be. Create the school under the patronage of Ammon and Thoth. and appoint Senemet as its first chancellor. Tai smiled. A fitting legacy for your reign, my son, forging bonds of peace through wisdom. By midday, decrees were dispatched across the land. Messengers rode north to Hattusa and south to Napata bearing invitations for cultural emissaries, while Egyptian engineers set sail upstream under the command of Tahatep, a seasoned architect. At dusk, Nebmatra walked along the riverbank beside the floating gardens. Papyrus reeds brushed against his sandals, and lotus blossoms perfumed the air. He reflected on the whirlwind of alliances he had woven, grain for peace with Nubia, scrolls for unity with Hatti, and the promise of knowledge for all. Yet he knew the broader world was far more complex. Bandits roamed the Sinai, raiding caravans. Sea people threatened Mediterranean trade. Rival claimants in distant provinces eyed the throne from afar. His diplomacy might buy breathing room, but true security required vigilance and adaptability. That night, he retreated to the rooftop. The constellations above glimmered like a tapestry of sacred glyphs, each star a story waiting to be read. He closed his eyes and murmured a prayer to Thoth for clarity, to Ammon for protection, and to Ra for guidance. In his heart, he felt the steady pulse of Egypt's destiny, a vision of a kingdom forged not by conquest alone, but by collaboration, a land where the people's needs shaped policy, and where a boy king could unite once warring realms through grain and scrolls, diplomacy and compassion. Thus closed the 6th chapter of his reign, a testament to the power of negotiation, the perils of ambition, and the promise that, in the shifting sands of politics, a single act of goodwill could ripple like an eternal delta, nourishing hearts and minds across the ancient world. The morning sun rose over Thebes in an unbroken blaze of gold, glinting off the towering pylons and setting the Nile's waters ablaze with scintillating light. Yet while the capital thrummed with life and burgeoning alliances, far to the east the Sinai desert lay silent under a scorching sky, its dunes rippling like liquid flame. It was to this harsh and unforgiving landscape that Pharaoh Nebmatra now turned his gaze. For reports had reached him that the road between Egypt and the Levant, vital for trade, grain shipments, and cultural envoys, had become prey to bands of raiders. Without secure passage, the fragile network of peace he had woven with Nubia and the Hittites could unravel like a tapestry in the wind. He stood on the palace balcony, draped in robes of deep lapis blue embroidered with gold thread, the royal cobra diadem glinting on his brow. At his side, General Horemheb, stalwart commander of Egypt's armies, unfurled a leather map on a marble balustrade. The red-inked routes snaked eastward, ending at the border fortress of Jaro, a stone sentinel guarding the last way station before the desert proper. Pharaoh Horemheb said in measured tones, "The raiders strike at caravans at dawn and dusk. Our scouts have lost 3 patrols in the past fortnight. They move swiftly on camelback, disappear into Wadis, and feast on fear." Nebmatra's dark eyes hardened. He recalled the grateful smiles of farmers in Nubia when Egyptian barges delivered grain, the scribes in Hatti copying Egyptian hymns in their clay archives, and the temple priests in Karnak praising Ammon for peace. All of that peace depended on safe roads. He nodded. "Then we must meet the threat in its own domain. Gather my chariot guard and the best desert scouts. We ride at first light." By dusk, the pharaoh's camp lay beyond Jaro's walls, pitched among date palms where the last green survived the encroaching sands. Colorful tents fluttered in the warm breeze, Horemheb's banners of red and gold, Senemet's scroll-laden pavilion, and a separate tent for Queen Tai, though she would not join the expedition, choosing instead to manage Thebes in Nebmatra's absence. In the camp center, a fire pit crackled. Nebmatra sat cross-legged on a mat of woven reeds, reviewing reports brought by scouts. The letters described raiders swathed in dark cloaks, led by a figure known only as the Scorpion, whose cruelty was legendary. Caravans burned, drivers slain, goods stolen. On one gruesome occasion, the raiders had left a trail of scorpion-stung corpses, as if to declare that death lurked in every grain sack. Sentiment approached, bearing to clay tablets inscribed with hieroglyphs. "My Pharaoh, I have compiled translations of intercepted messages. The Scorpion commands loyalty through fear. Yet there are whispers that he once served a foreign power, perhaps the Mitanni, or a Hittite vassal, and now seeks to carve his own dominion." Nebmatra traced the glyphs with a thoughtful finger. "Then he is no mere bandit, but a would-be warlord. If he controls the desert's passes, he could threaten the peace treaties we forged." He looked up at the starlit sky, as if seeking counsel from Ra himself. "We ride at dawn. We shall confront the Scorpion not with brute force alone, but with a challenge he cannot refuse." At first light, the pharaoh's entourage mounted camelback and set out across the sands. Horemheb and his captains formed the spearhead. Nebmatra followed in a light chariot drawn by swift stallions bred for desert travel. Scouts on foot and camels scouted ahead, their keen eyes searching for footprints, overturned pots, or the glitter of abandoned glass beads, the telltale signs of a raider's camp. The sun climbed, and the desert's breath grew hot and dry. The sky seemed to melt into the dunes, and the caravans of the past, from spice traders to copper miners, felt like distant dreams. Yet Nebmatra pressed on, guided by his sense of purpose. He thought of the lessons from the House of Life, that true leadership required both courage and compassion, even in barren lands. By late afternoon, they reached a nexus of wadis where trails converged. Horemheb signaled a halt. Scouts reported a freshly trampled route leading west, a likely path of retreat. Nebmatra dismounted and paced the shifting sands, studying the prints. A falcon soared overhead, its piercing cry echoing across the dunes. "It is here," he declared, voice calm. "We make our stand." Under his direction, soldiers ranged defensive positions among low dunes. Archers took vantage points. Cavalry dismounted to form a spear wall. Camel riders stood ready to harry the raiders' flanks. Nebmatra drew his ceremonial kopish sword, blade gifted by the Nubian king, and knelt to press a small scarab amulet into the sand. "With this token of our alliance," he murmured, "I bind our cause to the will of Ammon, Ibmak, and Ra. Let our justice be swift." That evening, as the sun sank like a burning ember, the raiders appeared on the horizon, a dust cloud rising like a phantom storm. Cloaked figures rode camelback, their scimitars gleaming. At their head rode the Scorpion himself, a tall man, cloaked in black, a silver mask carved with scorpion pincers concealing his face. Round his belt hung severed strips of caravan banners, a trophy gallery of his conquests. The raiders charged with a roar. Arrows hissed, spears braced. The clash of steel rang across the dunes. Nebmatra watched from his chariot platform, chanting the same incantation he had used for true sight, infusing his heart with resolve. Then, as the raiders clashed with Horemheb's lines, the pharaoh sprang into action. He leapt down, blade flashing in torchlight, and called out, "I am Nebmatra, Pharaoh and son of Ra. Lay down your arms and face judgment, the Scorpion, or be cast into the depths of your own ambition." The Scorpion paused, as if surprised at the boy king's boldness. He raised his scorpion-carved scepter and called back, voice muffled, "By the mask, Pharaoh, you come to a domain where divine law bends to power. I bow to no king." With that, he struck the ground with his scepter. Instantly, raiders surged forward. Nebmatra raised his kopish in reply and advanced into the fray. Against the howling wind, the boy king fought at Horemheb's side, smashing Aside a raider's curved sword, deflecting another's spear with a single disciplined parry. Though young, he fought with a ferocity born of conviction, every strike a statement that Egypt's peace would not be broken. Elsewhere on the field, Senemet directed medical scribes to tend the wounded. Queen Tai's loyal guard kept supply lines open. Camel riders drove raiders back from flanking maneuvers. Under the pharaoh's leadership, the tide turned. The scorpion's riders, used to striking soft targets, balked at facing a cohesive formation. Finally, the scorpion himself charged Nebmatra, intent on ending the challenge. Their blades met in a shower of sparks. Nebmatra recalled the scarab amulet beneath his feet, the papyrus promise of inner light, and channeled all his will into a feint and riposte that disarmed the masked warrior. The silver scorpion's scepter clattered in the sand, and the raider froze. Caught between rage and awe, Nebmatra pressed forward, blade at his throat. Yield, he commanded. Your reign of terror ends. The raider's mask clanged as he knelt, and with a slow gesture, he pulled it away, revealing a young man, hollow-cheeked, shadowed by desperation rather than cruelty. He lowered his eyes. I have fought for my people too, he said hoarsely. Starvation drove us. We sought grain we had been promised, then scorned. Pain flickered across Nebmatra's face. He sheathed his khopesh. Then you shall answer not with death, but with justice. You and your men will rebuild the roads you destroyed and guard the caravans safely. In your service, you will learn mercy and earn your own redemption. Silence fell as the raiders exchanged uncertain glances, then bowed their heads. When dawn broke over the dunes, Nebmatra assembled his new recruits, former raiders now bound by oath to protect trade routes and serve Egypt's grain caravans. The scorpion, unmasked and renamed Hesketh, knelt before the pharaoh and swore fealty. The boy king placed the scorpion-carved scepter in Hesketh's hands, its venom pincer motif transformed from sign of fear to symbol of guarded trust. Under Nebmatra's orders, the camp dismantled and moved eastward, escorting a great caravan of frankincense and spices bound for Byblos. Along the route, former raiders now guided merchants through treacherous wadis, their presence a living testament that even betrayal could be turned to loyalty under the banner of compassion. Back in Thebes, word of the desert triumph traveled like a sweet breeze. The Nubian engineers praised the new security. The Hittites sent congratulations, penned on copper plaques. Scribes copied the tale into illuminated scrolls destined for the temple libraries. And in Karnak, the priests chanted hymns to honor the pharaoh who had tamed the desert's wrath, not through slaughter alone, but through the higher trial of mercy. That night, Nebmatra returned to his private rooftop chamber, the desert wind still lingering on his skin. He knelt before his scarab amulet, whispered thanks to Ammon, Ra, and Thoth, and reflected true leadership tested him in the extremes of sun and sand, teaching that even in the harshest trials, the greatest victory lay not in conquering enemies, but in redeeming them. Thus closed the 7th chapter of his reign, a chronicle of courage in the face of dust-choked winds, a testament to the power of forgiveness, and proof that a desert's emptiness could be filled with new purpose when guided by a ruler's steadfast heart. The morning sun filtered through high lattice windows in the Hall of Maps, casting amber patterns on tables strewn with clay tablets and rolled parchments. Nebmatra rose from the carved cedar chair, muscles still taut from the desert campaign, yet his mind already weighed by the next challenge. Beyond securing borders and forging alliances, he knew that the greatest source of Egypt's enduring strength lay in its ancient wisdom, much of it entombed alongside pharaohs in hidden vaults beneath the sands. Now, the boy king resolved to unlock those silent repositories of the past. To guide his people's future. At his side stood Senemet, the bronze-masked librarian, whose knowledge of secret passages and tomb inscriptions was second only to the priests of Osiris. "My pharaoh," Senemet began, "our scouts surveying the western desert have rediscovered the entrance to the tomb of Neb-Kapr, an obscure ruler of the Second Intermediate Period. His funerary texts hint at medical recipes and irrigation, designs never seen since his time. If we can unearth these, Egypt's fields and healers would gain invaluable tools." Neb-Matra studied the faded hieroglyphs on the map tablet before him. The tomb lay hidden in the Great Sand Sea, 1,000 miles of shifting dunes where even seasoned travelers risked losing their way. Yet the promise of life-saving cures and canal blueprints outweighed any peril. He nodded resolutely. "Gather a small expedition, geographers, scribes, healers, and our finest desert scouts. I go with you." His voice carried the gravity of a ruler who would not ask of his people what he would not do himself. By midday, the pharaoh's party assembled at the edge of the western desert. Queen Tai pressed a slender flask of pure spring water into his hand and placed a lotus wreath upon his brow in blessing. "May the spirits of our forebears guide you," she whispered. Neb-Matra embraced her swiftly, then mounted his camel, his gaze sweeping the boundless horizon where sky and sand met in an unbroken arc of gold. The caravan set forth, 10 camels loaded with provisions, to chariots for swift travel, and a pair of sturdy horses for scouting. Scribes carried scroll cases sealed with wax. Healers bore linen sacks of herbs and mortars. Geographers held astrolabes and star charts. With Senemet leading the way, they plunged into the dunes, leaving behind the fertile banks of the Nile for the desert's silent domain. Days passed under the unrelenting sun. Each dawn, Neb-Matra stood on a dune crest, watching the caravan advance like a serpent's trail through rippling sand. He reflected on the nature of history, how even the greatest achievements could be lost to time, buried beneath waste after centuries of neglect. Yet if he succeeded, those ancient innovations could restore life to parched oases and heal the sick in Thebes. On the 5th morning, scouts returned with urgent news. The shifting sands had revealed a stone lintel buried at the base of a Duna-carved cartouche bearing Neb-Kapr's royal name. "We are close, Your Majesty," the lead scout said, eyes bright with excitement. "Tomorrow we may stand before the tomb's entrance." That evening, the caravan halted in a sheltered wadi. As fires crackled, Senemet unrolled a papyrus and read aloud the funerary inscription translated thus far: "He who commands the waters commands life. May the Osiris current guide your hand and the Isis moon bless your vision. In my chambers lie secrets of healing and channels unending." Neb-Matra's brow furrowed. Osiris current, perhaps a reference to seasonal floods, and Isis moon, maybe lunar irrigation cycles. He leaned closer. These lines suggest a synergy between celestial movements and agricultural planning. If we decode the formulas in the tomb, our farms could yield harvests beyond measure. The next dawn, the sun's first rays revealed a narrow shaft carved into the dune's side, its entrance framed by defaced reliefs worn by wind. The pharaoh dismounted and approached, heart pounding with awe and reverence. He traced the half-legible cool stone relief, a winged scarab rolling. The sun disk upward, a symbol of rebirth and hidden truth. With a nod to Senemet, he signaled the priests and scribes to prepare torches and incense. Together they entered the shaft, descending on stone steps slick with sand and echoing with each footfall. Faint hieroglyphs lined the walls' prayers to Thoth, incantations for protection, and diagrams of what appeared to be pulleys and levers, perhaps for lifting water. After an hour's descent, they reached a broad antechamber where the air grew cooler. In its center stood a stone sarcophagus, its lid ajar as if awaiting their arrival. Neb-Matra knelt respectfully, Great King Nekhepper, we come seeking the wisdom you laid to rest, he intoned softly. Around him, the priests poured libations of wine and scented oils. Then, with careful hands, the scribes pried open the sarcophagus further, revealing a smaller nested chest of cedar wood bound in bronze. Inside the chest lay 3 sealed scroll cases and a clay jar. The jar's lid bore the image of a lotus in full bloom. Sentiment opened the jar first, revealing a suspended plaster resin, paste a compound mixed with powdered malachite and lotus extract. Nebmatra inhaled its sharp, medicinal scent. This must be a wound salve, he said. We must bring samples to the healers in Karnak. Next, the scribes unsealed the scroll cases. The first contained a long papyrus showing precise canal cross sections, annotated with seasonal markers, likely instructions for regulating water flow according to flood levels. The second bore tables of plant names and measurements, probably a pharmacopoeia cataloging medicinal herbs. The third scroll was a constellation chart mapping the moon's phases against agricultural tests. As Nebmatra examined them, a rumble echoed from deeper within the tomb. Without warning, the chamber doors slammed shut, sealing them in darkness. Torches sputtered. An uneasy hush ensued. Then Senemut's voice cut through the gloom. It is a warden Assyrian trap to deter tomb robbers. We must find a release mechanism. By torchlight, they scoured the walls. Nebmatra traced his fingers over alcoves and reliefs, recalling the funerary inscriptions invocation, Osiris current and Isis moon. He turned to a relief of the moon's disk overhead, noting tiny holes beneath the stone carving. He pressed the discs in sequence of new moon, first quarter, full moon, and last quarter. With a grinding sound, a hidden panel slid aside, and the door creaked open. Relief and echo fell silent, and the party exhaled in unison. Wisdom laid to rest is wiser still, Nebmatra murmured, stepping outside. Let us carry these gifts back to the living world. The return journey across the desert was triumphant, yet solemn. The sands, once insurmountable, now seemed to part for them, bearing witness to their quest. Upon reaching Thebes, Nebmatra's caravan was hailed by the people lining the Nile's banks. Their cheers and offerings of dates and wine a living chorus of welcome. Within days, the scrolls were housed in the newly founded School of Diplomacy and Archival Sciences. Senemut's brainchild, he led teams of engineers to map the canal instructions, while healers tested the lotus malachite salve and added it to the temple infirmary supplies. Even the night chart was taught to farmers, who began planting by lunar cycle, reporting more consistent germination and healthier crops. On the evening of the harvest festival that followed, Nebmatra ascended the podium in Karnak's outer courtyard. Under a sky crowded with stars, he held aloft one of the recovered scrolls and addressed the assembled priests, nobles, and common folk. Great Osiris, who guides the dead through the underworld, has taught us through his chosen king that knowledge need not perish in tombs. Let these secrets nourish our fields and heal our wounds, so that Egypt may prosper in life as it endures in memory. A chorus of amen rose from the crowd, echoing off the temple pylons. Torches flickered like dancing spirits as the harvest dances began, celebrating not only the fruits of the earth, but the reclaiming of forgotten wisdom. Late that night, Nebmatra stood in the temple's inner cloister, gazing at the constellation chart projected on a domed ceiling. Senemut joined him quietly. Your Majesty, you have freed the past to guide the future. Nebmatra smiled softly, his heart swelling with the promise of Egypt's renewal. Let us never forget, he whispered, looking up at the stars, that the greatest treasures lie not in golden tombs, but in the minds and hearts of those who dare to seek truth even in the darkest places. Thus closed the 8th chapter of his reign, a journey into the silent heart of history, a triumph over tomb-born traps, and a testament to the power of recovered knowledge to kindle fresh life across the land of the Pharaohs. The dawn dawned, silent and cool over Thebes, as if the city itself held its breath. Nebmatra awoke to the distant toll of temple bells, their echoes rippling across the Nile. After 8 nights of trials, ritual triumphs, desert campaigns, and tomb recoveries, he felt the weight of destiny settle heavier upon his young shoulders. Today, the festival of light and shadow would commence, a ceremony invoking both his radiance and Sekhmet's fiery wrath. It was fitting that he, who had mastered life's joys and perils alike, should preside over such a rite. He dressed in ceremonial linen of pale gold, its threads woven with sun disk motifs. Around his neck he wore the Eye of Ra amulet, gleaming against his skin. In his hand he carried the papyrus chart of lunar planting, now a living testament to the wisdom he had reclaimed. Queen Tai entered, her presence serene as always, bearing the ankh scepter of peace. "My son," she said softly, placing the scepter in his grasp. "Today you stand at the threshold of balance. May your rule hold both light and shadow in harmony." Nebmatra bowed and followed her through the palace corridors, where priests and officials gathered in silent reverence. They passed by the Hall of Thrones, its pillars inscribed with scenes of past pharaohs in triumph and catastrophe. Nebmatra's gaze lingered on a relief of a king smitten by famine, a stark reminder that power misused could bring ruin. He straightened, resolve hardening. "Let our reign be one of compassion tempered by strength," he murmured. At the central plaza, crowds assembled in multitudes. Trumpets blared as Nebmatra and Tai took the throne dais. Before them lay 2 altars, one heaped with gold and barley, symbolizing life and abundance, the other with obsidian shards, representing the trials and sorrows that purified the heart. Priests chanted the dual hymn, "O Ra, bring forth the dawn of hope, O Sekhmet, purge our shadow's scope." The boy king raised his arms. "People of Egypt," he proclaimed, voice ringing across stone and air. "Today we honor that which gives and that which tests, for without shadow, light cannot be known, and without hardship, mercy has no purpose. May our nation balance both, and may no child fear either." A ripple of applause and murmurs of assent spread through the assembly. Yet in the back rows, a small group of dissenters stood silent. Former conspirators who had been pardoned yet bore grudges still. They watched, eyes aloof, as Nebmatra poured barley from one altar and cast obsidian shards from the other into a brazier, flames leaping with golden and dark tongues. Once the ceremony ended, Nebmatra withdrew to the temple courtyard for the private rite of insight. Here, only close counselors were admitted: Queen Tai, General Horemheb, Senemet, and Beketaman. In the center stood a shallow pool of water reflecting the sky, bordered by lotus petals. At its head lay the Book of True Names, recovered in the House of Life. To complete the rite, Nebmatra would call upon Thoth's wisdom and speak aloud the name of the city's hidden peril. Senemet knelt beside him, placing hands upon the book. "Great Pharaoh," he intoned, "the rite of insight will reveal the shadow-threatening Thebes. Speak its name, and the pool will illuminate its form." Nebmatra inhaled deeply, recalling all he had witnessed: famine-driven bandits, temple conspiracies, ancient tomb traps. Now, he prayed for clarity. He placed a slender finger on the book's page inscribed Kamatwer, the ancient name for Thebes, meaning great city. He spoke, "By the quill of Thoth, let the hidden falter and the truth emerge." As his voice faded, the water in the pool shimmered and darkened, then glowed with silver light. From its surface rose a wraith-like image, a hooded figure wielding a club and a sarcophagus-shaped mask. The vision faded, and Nebmatra understood. This was Sekinkit, a rumored brother of a past pharaoh, banished for practicing forbidden necromancy. Legend said he sought to raise the dead to serve him, casting a pall of dread across the land. Beketamen paled. Your Majesty, Sekinket's tomb lies west of the Valley of the Kings. He was condemned for opening gateways to the dead. Horemheb rose, hand on his sword's hilt. If he stirs now, his forces could undermine all we have built. We must act swiftly. Tai placed a calming hand on the general's arm. Patience, General. This is no ordinary foe. We must consult the priests of Osiris and Isis, and prepare both might and right. Nebmatra nodded gravely. Prepare an expedition at first light. We ride to the valley to seal his tomb and end his shadow. That night, the palace was alive with preparation. Scrolls were consulted for protective incantations. Healers brewed potent oils to guard against necrotic magics. Chariots were readied. Nebmatra stood on his rooftop, gazing at the stars aligned above the necropolis. A chill wind crept through the city, as though heralding the restless spirits of the tombs in the distance. The silhouettes of the pyramids and the valley's rocky ridges stood stark against the moon. Asterisk, asterisk, he whispered to the night. Sekinkit, your darkness ends with the dawn. At first light, the pharaohs escort Horemheb's legion, Senumut's scholars, and Beketamen's scouts rode westward along the river's edge. The air grew dry and ancient as they approached the cliffs of the Valley of the Kings. Here, tomb entrances gaped like silent mouths, guardians of the dead. Despite the morning sun, an unnatural gloom clung to the stones. They found Sekinket's sepulchre near the base of a narrow gully. The entrance was barred by a massive stone door, etched with skull motifs. Stalwart guards braced poles against it, but it would not budge. Senumut stepped forward, laying his bronze mask against the stone and reciting an incantation of sealing, drawn from the Book of Hidden Names. Symbols glowed on the threshold as he spoke. Byra's light and Osiris's rest led this tomb's. Shadowbeat laid to rest. With a thunderous sound, the door slid open, revealing a dark staircase descending into blackness. The expedition lit torches and followed Nebmatra, each step sending dust motes dancing in the flames. The air grew colder, and Nebmatra felt a pulse of necrotic energy and unnatural stirring of life beyond death. At the bottom, they entered the burial chamber. Sarcophagi lay toppled. Offerings lay scattered. Curse inscriptions ran across the walls. None shall disturb my slumber, lest life itself become my prey. In the chamber's center stood a sarcophagus carved like a jackal-headed Anubis, its lids sealed by a complex locking mechanism of bronze rings. Nebmatra approached, feeling the gloom press upon him. He laid a hand on the lid and recited his father's name, Amenhotep III, invoking the protection of ancestral kings. The bronze rings glowed faintly with a golden light, and the lid shuddered. Horemheb and Beketamen heaved it aside, revealing the skeletal remains of Sekinkit, draped in tattered priestly robes. At his feet lay a stela inscribed, "He who controls death shall command the living. May none awaken me, for the world shall bow." As Senumut read the lines, a low moan echoed through the chamber. Dust swirled, and a spectral shape rose where the corpse lay, pale, gaunt, with eyes like smoldering coals. Sekinket's spirit hovered, drawing power from the scattered relics. The general raised his spear. "Your Majesty, we must banish him." But Nebmatra held up a hand. "No. His rage stems from a wound of injustice, twisted by darkness. Seek the root, not only the blade." Turning to Senumut, he commanded, "Use the ancient purification rite, combine healing salve with lotus moon incantations. Offer him release, not destruction." Tribal priests prepared a paste of lotus malachite and spoke sacred words to honor Sekinket's original service to Egypt. They chanted, "Spirit of Sekimkit, once sworn to protect. Your path twisted by power, by sorrow unchecked, accept. These rites of mercy, release your unrest, find rest in the embrace of Osiris's breast." Nebmatra advanced through the spirit's wail, holding aloft a lotus-embossed lantern whose light was said to carry the breath of Isis. As the incantation reached its climax, the spirit's form flickered, anger giving way to anguish. The skeletal figure clutched its head, then collapsed into a swirl of petals and golden sand that drifted across the floor. Silence reigned. Nebmatra knelt and whispered, "May your soul find peace beyond the veil." He sealed the sarcophagus once more with a band of lotus-etched bronze, and carved a new offering inscription, "Here lies Sekimkit reborn through mercy. Let his shade now rest in eternal dusk." Exiting the tomb, Nebmatra felt the valleys shadow lift, as though a great weight had been removed. Outside, the sun shone brighter, its rays cutting through the morning haze. Horemheb and Bekataman bowed. Sentiment removed his mask, eyes glistening with relief. On the return ride, they encountered caravan masters who had long feared the valley's curses. When Nebmatra passed, they knelt and offered gifts of dates and wine. For the first time, the Valley of the Kings felt less like a place of dread and more like hallowed ground deserving of respect, not fear. That evening in Thebes, torches blazed in the temple courtyards. Nebmatra presided over a thanksgiving rite, offering praise to Ra, Osiris, and Isis. He spoke to the people, "Today we honored both life and death, demonstrating that mercy can vanquish the darkest shadows. May Thebes forever stand as a beacon where compassion tempers power, and where no soul living or departed is beyond the reach of justice and grace." A resounding cheer rose under the starlit sky. Nebmatra looked upon the city's flickering lights, knowing that tomorrow, the final chapter of his journey would unfold. But for now, he savored the harmony between light and shadow, a harmony he had fought to restore, one sacred rite at a time. The first light of dawn broke gently over Thebes, painting the city's whitewashed walls in hues of rose and gold. After 9 trials of power, mercy, knowledge, and courage, the 10th day arrived not as an end, but as a beginning. The coronation of Nebmatra, not merely as pharaoh by name, but as pharaoh by deed, whose reign would be remembered as the dawning of a new age for Egypt. On the palace's grand balcony, Nebmatra stood clad in the ceremonial robes woven with threads of lapis lazuli and gold, the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt resting firmly upon his brow. Round his neck hung the Eye of Ra amulet. In his right hand he bore the Ankh scepter, symbol of life. In his left, the crook and flail, signifying shepherd, king, and judge. His mother, Queen Tai, stood at his side, her proud gaze steady despite knowing that the true test of rule lay not in ceremony, but in action. Below them, in the central plaza, every soul in Thebes had gathered, priests in their gleaming white linen, soldiers in bronze gleaming armor, scribes with ink pots at the ready, artisans, farmers, and laborers whose lives had been touched by the boy king's compassion. Even those who had whispered against him now assembled in silence, curiosity and hope shading their faces. At the far end, on the steps of the great temple of Ammon, Sentiment presided as master of ceremonies, ready to deliver the scriptures that would immortalize this day. As trumpets sounded, Nebmatra raised his arms in benediction, and a hush fell. Sentiment intoned the proclamation of the new era. "Hearken, people of Kemet, land of the Nile's endless flow. Today dawns the reign of Nebmatra Amenhotep IV, the living Horus, son of Ra. He who has walked the trials of power and mercy, knowledge and courage, who tamed the desert's wrath and brought forth the dead from shadow, who restored the wisdom of past kings to guide the living. now ascends the throne with heart tempered by compassion and hand guided by truth. Let his name ring through generations, that Egypt may stand ever renewed. At these words, Nebmatra touched the crook and flail to his heart, pledging to uphold justice and nurture life. He then turned to Queen Tai, kneeling briefly to receive her blessing, and rose to stand before the people as their sovereign in both title and deed. From the crowds arose a unified chant, Neb Ma at Re. Neb Ma at Re. The ground vibrated with their voices, carrying across the plaza and echoing off the temple pylons. Soldiers saluted. Priests scattered lotus petals. Trumpets and drums blended into a triumphant roar of celebration. Yet, for Nebmatra, the true weight of the moment lay not in applause, but in the faces before him. The starving farmer, whose fields had been restored, now smiling under new irrigation. The healed child clutching the lotus mullahite salve, the former raider now guarding caravans with scorpion-carved scepter in hand. Each bore witness to a reign built on partnership between ruler and ruled. As the ceremony progressed, additional honors were bestowed. General Horemheb was granted the title Champion of Kemet, acknowledging his leadership in both battle and sanctuary. Senemet became keeper of occult wisdom, charged with preserving and expanding Egypt's libraries. Beketamen and Nefer, Nebmatra's loyal sister, were named guardians of the people, symbolizing the bond between king and citizen. Even High Priest Amenhotep, having repented his role in the conspiracy, received a chance at redemption, permitted to continue temple service. Under the pharaoh's watchful guidance, after the formalities, Nebmatra led the procession into the Temple of Ammon. The aisles glowed with torchlight, illuminating vast statues and intricate reliefs. In the inner sanctum, he offered the ankh and crook to Ammon himself, through the high priest's hands, and then reclaimed them, symbolizing the covenant between God, king, and people. The incense rose in clouds, carrying prayers for prosperity, justice, and peace. Emerging into the midday sun, Nebmatra guided the people toward the banks of the Nile, where boats had been prepared. On his command, the river pageant began. Barges lavishly decorated with lotus and papyrus set sail downstream, carrying grain to feed remote villages. Scrolls containing medical and agricultural secrets to be copied for temple and village libraries, and sacred relics for ceremonies in every city. The flotilla stretched along the river's curve, a living river of renewal. Queen Tai, atop the lead barge, addressed those aboard, as the Nile nourishes our lands, so shall Nebmatra's reign nourish our hearts and minds. Let each wave bear the promise of justice renewed. And so the people watched, tears of joy mingling with the spray of the river, as grain and knowledge were sent to every corner of Egypt. Where once walls had stood between ruler and subject, now bridges of understanding and cooperation spanned desert and delta alike dot as dusk approached. Nebmatra returned to the palace for the final rite, the covenant of the crown, held in the sun court. Here, the pharaoh walked barefoot across white marble inlaid with gold suns, pausing at each quadrant to speak aloud his vows. I vow to wield my power with mercy, to see with the truth of Thoth, to protect with the courage of Horus, and to nurture with the compassion of Isis. With each vow, the golden suns beneath his feet glowed softly, as though affirming his pledge. When the last light faded, a single sun-shaped jewel in the center of the court blazed bright, symbolizing Egypt's hope shining through unity. That night, feasting began under lantern-lit pavilions. Musicians played lyres and drums. Dancers performed rituals ancient and new. Poets recited verses celebrating the achievements of the new era. Nebmatra walked among the people, sharing wine with vintners, sampling olives with traders, and joining children in games along the courtyard's edge. In his laughter and easy conversation, His subjects saw not a distant god-king, but a friend and shepherd or ruler, whose authority sprang from service, not mere decree. Asterisk before retiring, Nebmatra climbed to his rooftop sanctuary, where a small scarab amulet and a papyrus scroll lay atop his nightstand. He placed the scarab at the window's ledge, looking out upon the city's lights, and unrolled the scroll, which bore the words he had written so many nights before. May the light within each heart guide the course of our land. Let compassion be our compass and justice our beacon. As long as the Nile flows, so shall Egypt's spirit endure. He folded the scroll and placed it beneath his pillow. Then, gazing upward at the stars, he whispered a final prayer to Ra. O great sun, grant me the strength to guard this promise in the days ahead. For though this chapter closes, the story of Egypt continues, written by every hand, under every sun, and guided by every heart that dares to dream. As sleep claimed him, the scars of his trials glowed faintly like distant embers, reminders of the journey that had forged a boy into a pharaoh of wisdom and grace. And in the silent stillness before dawn, the land of Kemet, rich with history and promise, rested secure under the watchful eye of its living Horus, ready to sail into an age bright with hope and harmony. Asterisk asterisk dawn broke over Thebes with a soft glow, as though the city itself exhaled in relief after the grand coronation. Yet for Pharaoh Nebmatra, the true work of leadership began now in the quiet hours that followed celebration, where plans must be forged and vigilance never sleeps. As the first rays of sunlight struck the palace's alabaster facade, he rose from his bed of fine linen, slipping on the light sandals and simple linen tunic he reserved for study and counsel. Today he would convene the Council of Scales, the body tasked with turning his bold visions into enduring institutions. He descended to the Hall of Scales, a lofty chamber lined with bronze panels depicting Ma'at, goddess of truth and balance, holding her feather against an ancient heart. Along the walls, clerks and scribes whispered beneath hanging tapestries illustrating scenes of judgment, harvest, and justice. At a horseshoe table of polished cedar sat Queentai, General Horemheb, Senemet Beketaman, and representatives of temple, nobility, military, and common citizenry, voices now woven into the tapestry of governance. Nebmatra took his seat at the center, touching the carved symbol of Ma'at etched into the tabletop. Friends and counselors, he began, voice steady, we have built alliances, redeemed the desert, reclaimed lost wisdom, and balanced light and shadow. But all this triumph will fade unless we craft systems that endure beyond a single reign. Today, we weigh the scales of eternity. 1. Law and justice. The first topic was legal reform. Queentai rose, presenting a sealed scroll from communities across Egypt. Your Majesty, she said, we've received petitions from Upper and Lower Egypt, disputes over water rights, boundary conflicts between villages, and questions of inheritance when records were lost. We need a unified code of Ma'at, clear laws accessible to all, not just the priestly scribes. Senemet unrolled his book of precedents, filled with fragments of earlier legal texts. We can systematize these into 5 volumes: property, family, trade, crime, and ritual. Each will begin with a principle of balanced punishment proportionate to harm, rights protected by procedure, and avenues for appeal. General Horemheb nodded thoughtfully. I suggest local tribunals with elected elders, overseen by royal magistrates. This keeps justice close to the people while safeguarding against abuse. Beketaman, speaking for the commoners, added, and let judgments be announced publicly so all know the law's face. Transparency will build trust. Nebmatra leaned forward. Then it is decided. We shall codify the Code of Ma'at, establish local tribunals, and ensure public readings of verdicts. Let the scales tip neither toward tyranny nor chaos, but rest in unwavering balance. 2. Education and knowledge. Next came education. Sentiment presented sketches for an expansion of the School of Diplomacy and Archival Sciences, proposing satellite schools in major provincial centers. The seeds we planted in Thebes must grow in Memphis, Heliopolis, and Elephantine. We will train scribes, engineers, and healers drawn from every social estate. Queen Tai added, we should integrate practical apprenticeships, farmers teaching irrigation, artisans teaching crafts alongside scholarly instruction. Knowledge must serve daily life. Neb Matra smiled. Thus shall we forge a network of learning, each community both student and teacher, sharing wisdom like the Nile's waters. 3. Economic fairness. The treasurers laid out figures showing that although grain had distributed evenly after the festival, merchants had begun cornering certain markets, silk from the east, copper from the Sinai, and hoarding to drive prices. Your Majesty, they warned, prosperity tempts greed. General Horemheb suggested a system of royal price ceilings on essential goods and seasonal auctions managed by village councils. Becca Taman proposed grain bond certificates villagers could trade, backed by state reserves, ensuring no one starves when harvests dip. Neb Matra considered, we will enact price ceilings, organize regular, rotating markets under royal oversight, and issue grain bonds redeemable at granaries. Let no man or merchant profiteer from another's need. 4. Sustainable infrastructure. Sentiment and Tai unveiled plans for the Great Canal Circuit, linking canals from Aswan to the Delta with sluice gates timed by lunar phases. Knowledge recovered from Nebuchadnezzar's tomb. They proposed planting salt-tolerant palms along canal banks to stabilize soil, and installing communal water wheels to lift Nile water into terrace fields. Horemheb mapped military roads alongside canals, ensuring troops and trade caravans share safe passage. Infrastructure built for peace, he said, serves in war. Neb Matra rose. Let the Nile not only feed our bodies, but connect our hearts and minds. We build canals, roads, and ties that bind Egyptians to each other and their pharaoh. 5. Cultural and spiritual renewal. Finally, the high priest of Ammon delivered a solemn petition. Temples across Egypt craved a festival of unity, a yearly observance celebrating all gods Ammon, Ra, Osiris, Isis, Hathor, reminding Egyptians that each deity's virtue must harmonize with all others. Neb Matra approved. Let us inaugurate the Feast of Many Names, where priests interchange rituals and Assyrian lament followed by Hathor's dance, Ta's crafts followed by Isis's healing rites. In unity, we honor Egypt's diversity and keep the priesthood accountable to each other. With that, Neb Matra lifted his hands and spoke the final decree. By the authority vested in me as son of Ra and shepherd of Ma'at, I establish these principles as pillars of our realm: laws of balance, public and fair, education widespread, practical and scholarly, economy just, ensuring no belly goes empty, infrastructure enduring, binding far and near, spiritual unity, weaving all paths into one tapestry of faith. May these measures guide Egypt into an age beyond my life, that our land may flourish. Under the watchful scales of eternity, a hush fell, broken only by the distant call of temple trumpets. Then the hall erupted in applause, the scales on the walls seeming to tremble in approval. Epilogue. The legacy candle. That evening, Neb Matra stood alone in his private chapel, lighting a single candle before the statue of Ma'at. The amber flame danced against the alabaster walls. He held the code scroll, plans for schools, grain bonds, canal diagrams, and the papyrus detailing the Feast of Many Names, all bound together in a leather satchel. He whispered a prayer. Oh, Ma'at, may these works stand long after I rest in my tomb. May future pharaohs honor balance over self, wisdom over wealth, mercy over might. As the candle's glow softened, the scales above flickered, casting twin shadows that met in perfect symmetry. Nebmatra felt a profound calm, the knowledge that his reign was not an era of a single man, but the awakening of an ideal. That a pharaoh could be both ruler and servant, God's son and people's shepherd. Beyond the palace walls, Thebes slept. Under a canopy of stars, each star a promise of tomorrow, each dream a seed of future glory. And in the silent night, the flame of Ma'at burned bright, a beacon guiding Egypt's heart toward justice, compassion, and unity for all time. Asterisk, the sun had barely risen over Thebes when the city awoke to a new urgency. Words circulated through the bakeries and taverns, the scriptoriums and stables. Pharaoh Nebmatra planned to journey upriver to Elephantine, at the very border of Egypt, to inaugurate the first provincial school of diplomacy and archival sciences. This bold experiment, born in the Hall of Scales 12 days past, would bring formal education and record keeping to the farthest reaches of the kingdom. If successful, every known province would have trained scribes, engineers, and healers. If it failed, the gulf between center and periphery could widen into rebellion. Nebmatra himself stood on the palace balcony, watching barges slip downstream under the morning glow. He wore robes of crisp white linen trimmed with turquoise thread, modest attire, befitting a student king among teachers and scribes. Across his shoulders lay a light cloak bearing the seal of the new Gul, a stylized papyrus scroll entwined with a lotus. In his hand he held the Code of Ma'at, bound in calf leather, its pages inscribed with the laws that were already being read aloud in markets from Memphis to Abydos. Queen Tai joined him, her braid pinned with crimson carnelian beads. Your journey will mark a new chapter, she said gently. The people of Elephantine await you with hope and with questions. Nebmatra nodded, recalling the letters he had received, village elders seeking instruction in irrigation, merchants asking for record templates, priests asking for guidance on integrating the feast of many names into local rites. We ride today, he replied. Let our presence be both teacher and learner, showing that Pharaoh's duty is to serve wherever his people dwell. By mid-morning, a flotilla of barges stood ready at the palace docks, one carrying Nebmatra and Tai, another for Horemheb and the royal guard, a third for Senemet and the scribes, and several more laden with desks, reed pens, ink pots, carefully packed scrolls, and even samples of lotus malachite salve. As the barges cast off, trumpets blasted a fanfare of departure. Citizens lined the quay, cheering and throwing petals of frankincense into the water. The voyage up the Nile unfolded like a moving tapestry of Egypt's diversity. At Elephantine's approach, the river split around the lush island, its sandy banks dotted with palm groves, its tumble-down fortresses bearing the chipped reliefs of Khnum, god of the cataracts. Fishermen in small skiffs waved, Nubian traders in woven kilts offered baskets of figs. Nebmatra and his entourage disembarked at a newly constructed jetty, where the governor of Aswan greeted them with a ceremonial libation of wine and water from both the Nile's blue and white branches. In the main square, villagers had erected a pavilion of papyrus mats. Under its shade sat a row of local dignitaries, priests of Khnum and Sadat, representatives of merchant guilds, and schoolmasters from the old temple school. When Nebmatra stepped forward, the hush of expectation was almost painful. He spoke, first in the language of official ceremony, then shifted fluidly into the vernacular of the border folk, impressive for one so young. Children of the cataracts, he began, you stand at the seam of worlds, between river and desert, between Egypt and Nubia. Today, we begin a journey of discovery together. The school we found here will teach you the ways of writing, healing, and engineering that sustain our land. You will teach us how to live at this crossroads with respect for both the Nile's bounty and the desert's mystery." A collective murmur of approval rose. An elderly scribe unfurled one of the scrolls Nebmatra had brought a sample lesson on hieratic writing. He turned to a young student poised with reed pen in hand and said, "Show His Majesty what you know." The boy's hand trembled as he drew the sign for water and life. Nebmatra inclined his head in earnest admiration. "Well done," he said, placing a small silver drachma in the boy's palm. "May your words flow as the Nile's waters." Over the course of the day, Nebmatra and his court toured the site of the new school, a repurposed temple hall fitted with low desks, an adjoining chapel where the Feast of Many Names would be observed each year, workshops for boat building and simple carpentry, and an outdoor demonstration area for canal building techniques gleaned from the tomb of Nebkheper. He paused before a model of a sluice gate, stroked its miniature paddle wheel, and declared, "Here will be the seeds of tomorrow's harvest." But as evening fell, and torches were lit along the riverbank, a darker note emerged. A band of local notables, shepherd lords, whose grazing lands lay beyond the island, approached Horemheb under a banner of quiet dissent. In the glow of the lanterns, their faces were drawn and wary. They gathered behind closed screens and demanded that the new school not teach engineering that might divert water to foreign farms, depriving their flocks. They feared that scribal literacy would upset centuries-old customs, placing power in the hands of those who could read the law. News of their objections reached Nebmatra as he dined with Tai and Senemet in a pavilion draped with red and gold cloth. The young pharaoh set aside his cup of spiced wine. "They challenge what we build," he said thoughtfully, fingers tracing the grain of the table. "We promise unity, yet some cling to privilege." Senemet laid a calming hand on his shoulder. "Let us bring them into the process. Knowledge need not be taken, let it be shared. Invite their chief, shepherd lord, to oversee the irrigation curriculum and grant him honor in the school's board." Queen Tai nodded. "And let us hold a feast of many names here tomorrow, inviting all castes. In ritual unity, we can heal suspicion." Nebmatra smiled, relief softening his features. "So it shall be. We who teach must also learn empathy." At dawn, the palace flotilla reassembled for a second day's assembly. This time, the shepherd lord was seated beside Nebmatra, and Tai, elevated before the crowd. The boy king acknowledged him by name **Sobkhotep, he whose heart flows like the crocodile, **, and presented him with a reed-woven staff of office. "Sobkhotep," Nebmatra proclaimed, "you will guide how water flows to all who dwell here. May your flocks and our fields thrive side by side." Moved by the gesture, Sobkhotep rose and addressed the assembly. "Pharaoh has shown that in unity lies strength. Let this school be a bond, not a burden." His assent rang across the crowd, dissolving the last murmurings of doubt. With that, the Feast of Many Names commenced. Priests of Khnum performed a ritual to invoke the cataract's creative power, followed by worship of Bastet for protection, of Hathor for joy, and of Thoth for wisdom. Musicians played flutes carved from reed, and dancers wove in patterns mimicking the river's flow. Nebmatra joined the procession, carrying an anointing bowl filled with scented oils. At each altar, he poured libations and recited a line from the Code of Ma'at, reminding all that law and ritual were two sides of the same coin. As night deepened, the school hall's lanterns glowed like stars along the Nile. Nebmatra walked among the desks, where scribes demonstrated writing exercises and engineers plotted canal routes in the sand. He paused to speak with one young woman, a healer's apprentice named Merit, who had just learned to grind malachite and lotus into salve. She beamed up at him. "I will bring this to the infirmary in Luxor," she said. "Our people are ready to heal by your light, O Pharaoh." Nebuchadnezzar's heart swelled. In that moment he saw his vision fulfilled, a kingdom where every citizen, whether noble or farmer, could partake in knowledge, justice, and ritual. Yet he also sensed that the true test lay beyond these walls in the years to come, as reforms passed from neonate idea to ingrained custom. That night, as the flotilla set sail back to Thebes under a moonlit sky, Nebuchadnezzar stood at the prow, wind lifting his cloak. The river carried him homeward, past islands and reed beds, toward a city transformed by his deeds. Behind him lay Elephantine, a beacon of learning at Egypt's edge, and before him spread the land of his people, vast in its promise. He closed his eyes and whispered a vow to Thoth. "May this school endure when I am dust. May every heart in Kemet beat with the pulse of knowledge and the promise of unity." In the silent night, the Nile rippled its ascent, and the lights of Thebes gleamed like distant embers, proof that even a single spark of change, kindled by a boy king, could set an age aflame with hope. A week had passed since the flotillas triumphant return from Elephantine, and Thebes still shimmered with renewed vitality. Markets overflowed with fresh produce, the new canals hummed with activity, and laughter rang through the halls of the School of Diplomacy and Archival Sciences. Yet beneath this bright facade, a silent threat stirred, carried on the river's currents. It began in the delta. Fishermen hauling their nets at dawn spoke of fish floating belly up, their scales dull and eyes glassy, along the riverbanks. Children complained of stomach pains and fever. By midday, entire villages fell ill, blotches on skin, violent chills, and a cough that rattled like wind through papyrus reeds. Word traveled upriver on humble barges and merchant canoes, arriving in Thebes by midday courier. Nebuchadnezzar sat in the Hall of Scales, reviewing the reports. Before him lay maps marking affected nome after nome, their borders streaked in red ink. Beside him, Senemet studied a fragment of papyrus, an ancient remedy recalled from Nebuchadnezzar's pharmacopoeia, where river waters turn foul. Grind lotus root with tamarisk oil, boil pomegranate rind in water of the new moon, and bind the fevered flesh with linen drenched in myrrh. Queen Tai placed a soothing hand on her son's shoulder. "The healers from Karnak are ready, but the sickness moves faster than our barges." General Horemheb frowned. "We must quarantine the worst-hit villages, but that risks leaving families isolated. They may turn to banditry for food and water." Bekataman, representing the commoners, spoke next. "My brothers and sisters fear both the plague and the guard's spear. They need reassurance and clean water." Nebuchadnezzar tapped his fingers on the table, heart heavy. "Then we shall meet both needs. I decree every affected village will receive a field hospital staffed by the House of Life's healers, guarded by volunteers from the school's graduates. We will distribute ancient remedies alongside our own developments: lotus malachite, salve for skin, pomegranate decoctions for fever, tamarisk-infused water for purification. No villager may refuse aid under penalty of royal decree. Senemet bowed. "I will dispatch scribes to copy and distribute the treatments at every landing. We must also test the waters if the Nile's currents have shifted. We may need to clean or redirect them." Queen Tai added, "I shall oversee the supply chains, grain, medicinal herbs, and linen bandages. Let no home run out of provisions." Horemheb saluted. "And I will station guards at quarantine lanes. Only those healed or certified by the healers may pass." Thus the plan was set. Within hours, the first field hospital appeared on the riverbank near Mendes, its canvas walls adorned with the symbol of Ma'at to reassure the frightened. Healers from Karnak, both men and women, arrived in boats draped with lotus garlands led by high healer Nefer, daughter of the late Prince Kashada and a trusted apprentice of Sentiment. Nefer wasted no time. She organized triage under the shade of palm fronds, instructing attendants to separate the mildly ill from the gravely stricken. Lotus root poultices soothed skin lesions, pomegranate rind tea broke fevers, tamarisk oil cleansed wounds. Bit by bit, villagers' strength returned. Word of the cure spread. Those still healthy flocked to the hospital for prophylactic tonics, but not all welcomed the pharaoh's medicine. In one riverside hamlet, a local priest of Sekhmet, goddess of plague and healing, accused the royal healers of defying divine will. He called for the people to reject foreign remedies and instead pray for Sekhmet's mercy. Tensions flared. A mob gathered around a healing tent, hissing at the scribes copying treatment papyri. When Nebmatra heard of this, he rode himself to the village, accompanied by Beketaman and two of the school's most eloquent scribes. Arriving at dusk, he found the healing tents deserted and the priest standing before a small shrine to Sekhmet, his eyes aflame. "Why do you turn away my people from the gift of healing?" Nebmatra called, voice ringing in the cooling air. "Have we defied the gods, or honored them by saving their children?" The priest spat in reply. "Your medicines mock Sekhmet's sacred role. Only her wrath and blessing decide who lives." Nebmatra dismounted, removing his diadem and holding it before the assembled crowd. "Behold the eye of Ra, protector of life. Yet even Ra yields to Sekhmet's power. I come not to defy the gods, but to honor them by ending the suffering they would have witnessed. If you will not take my remedy, then at least allow Sekhmet's priests to join our efforts. Let faith and medicine walk hand in hand." Murmurs spread. Slowly, the priest's rigid stance softened. Under the pharaoh's gaze and the people's pleading eyes, he relented. If his son walks with Sekhmet's hand, so be it. The next dawn, the small shrine was repurposed as a chapel-clinic hybrid. Sekhmet's priests chanted incantations over the healing pots as the royal healers poured pomegranate decoctions. The combination of divine intercession and measured remedy wrought a profound effect. Fevers broke, and villagers wept in relief, blessing both gods and king. Meanwhile, Sentiment and Horemheb led hydro-engineers upriver to investigate the Nile's changing currents. They discovered that a recent silt deposit near the main lagoon had diverted muddy water into feeding canals, fouling the irrigation dikes. Under the pharaoh's orders, workers dredged the silt, rebuilding levees and installing wooden filters made from reed mats coated in limestone paste, another innovation drawn from Nebkheper's tomb. Scrolls dot as the water cleared, outbreaks subsided. Within 3 weeks, the average village reported a 90% recovery rate. Grain deliveries resumed untainted. Fishermen found healthy shoals once more. Nebmatra visited each field hospital, greeting survivors, distributing extra linen for their beds, and ensuring that no family was left destitute. In Thebes, a grand Thanksgiving rite was held in Karnak's outer precinct. Under towering columns, Nebmatra stood with Queen Tai, High Healer Nefer, General Horemheb, and Sentiment. Before them sprawled thousands of recovered faces, farmers, weavers, priests, and children, all bearing small lotus tokens as symbols of rebirth. Like petals on the Nile, they gathered to give thanks. Nebmatra raised his arms. "Today we honor Ra for guiding us, Sekhmet for teaching us, and Ma'at for showing us the path between compassion and duty. Let every cup raised carry a prayer to the gods, and every gesture of healing bind our bonds ever tighter." The crowd cheered, and priests released doves, their white wings catching the western light. Musicians played hymns of gratitude, and dancers traced the river's curves across the stone floor. That evening, in the quiet of his private sanctuary, Nebmatra unrolled the papyrus chart once more. The plague's trail was marked in now light ink, transformed from scarlet blots to gentle green lines indicating healing. He recited a prayer to Thoth for the preservation of knowledge, and to Isis for enduring compassion. Queen Tai entered, laying a hand on his shoulder. "You have faced darkness and brought light," she said softly. "But remember, each challenge teaches us humility and unity." Nebmatra nodded. "The Nile gave me both plague and cure. In its waters I saw the dual face of life capable of both ruin and renewal." He folded the chart and placed it beside the Code of Ma'at and the canal blueprints. "May these lessons flow forever through Egypt. Like the river itself, furthest lessons at its headwaters, closest care at its mouth." Outside, the night breeze rustled palace granary reeds. The great river flowed on, undisturbed in its silent purpose. Yet for the people of Kemet, nothing remained the same. They had seen the swift turn from sickness to health, from despair to hope. And in their hearts, they carried a profound truth, that under a wise pharaoh's hand, even a plague could become a parable of unity, courage, and the enduring force of compassion. Thus closed the 13th chapter of Nebmatra's reign, a testament to leadership in crisis, the integration of faith and science, and the ever-flowing promise that through knowledge and mercy, a kingdom's spirit may endure beyond any trial. Asterisk, asterisk, by the time the 15th dawn approached, Thebes had transformed into a city humming with purpose. The plague that once threatened its people had become a distant memory, replaced by chants of healing and the steady rhythm of oars on the Nile. Yet in the heart of this renewal, Pharaoh Nebmatra recognized that true restoration required more than medicine, and engineering it demanded a rekindling of the spirit, a celebration of life's enduring song. As morning mists drifted across the river, Nebmatra rose before first light and made his way to the temple of Hathor, goddess of music and joy. There, beneath columns carved with dancing figures and trumpeting cherubs, he joined High Priestess Meritamen in selecting instruments for the Festival of Renewal, a joyous event he had decreed in the wake of the plague's end. Meritamen held out lyres strung with gold and gut. Others offered aloes pipes, tambourines, and metal rattles shaped like lotus pods. "This festival," Nebmatra explained, voice soft in the dim torchlight, "will remind our people that even after darkness, music can lead us into the light." Meritamen nodded, her eyes reflecting both reverence and excitement. "Let us awaken Hathor's song across Egypt, from Elephantine's cataracts to the delta's marshes." Word of the festival spread swiftly. Artisans in workshops wove colorful banners depicting lotus lilies and sun discs. Scribes inscribed invitations on papyrus scrolls and sent them forth on barges, flanked by painted boats. Musicians from every gnome villages of reed flutes, and city orchestras alike prepared new compositions blending traditional hymns with melodies they had learned in the school of diplomacy and archival sciences. On the eve of the festival, Nebmatra summoned his closest counselors to the Hall of Scales. "We have healed bodies and restored fields," he began, "but now we must heal the heart of Egypt. Tomorrow, let every voice join in a single song of renewal." Queen Tai suggested that each province contribute its own local verse, so that the final chorus would be a tapestry of voices. General Horemheb proposed protecting the festival grounds with discreet patrols to ensure safety, without dampening joy. Sentiment offered to record the melodies for future generations. With the plan set, Nebmatra and Tai moved through the city, visiting orphanages where children practiced clapping rhythms, and taverns where street musicians honed their scales. Beside lanterns, everywhere, the air vibrated with anticipation. In the palace courtyard, temple dancers rehearsed steps that traced the Nile's winding path, while potters shaped clay whistles for common folk. Even former raiders, now serving as caravan escorts, volunteered to carry drums and tambourines into remote hamlets, inviting villagers to join the celebration. At sunrise on the festival day, Nebmatra led a grand procession from the palace to the temple of Ammon. He rode in a chariot decked with lotus blossoms, accompanied by Queen Tai on horseback, their banners streaming in the morning breeze. Behind them marched columns of musicians' tambourines. First, then all those pipes, then lyres, and at the rear, dancers in costume twirled scarves dyed in sunset hues. Children scattered rose petals along the procession route, and citizens poured from their homes to line the streets, clapping and chanting. In greeting, arriving at Karnak's vast forecourt, Nebmatra dismounted and addressed the assembled multitudes. People of Kemet, he called, voice echoing against sandstone pylons. Today we celebrate life's triumph over death, hope over despair, and music over silence. Let every heart here be an instrument in Hathor's symphony. A gentle breeze stirred the banners, and at a single signal, the first drumbeats sounded. The festival began with the Hathoric invocation, a traditional hymn rendered anew by the leading chanter, Amun-Ra. His voice rose in clear, ringing tones. O Lady of the West, who blesses us with mirth, let music flow like the Nile's ceaseless course. In notes of joy may our sorrows find dearth. In rhythms of grace, may life's gentle force. When the last echoes of the festival of renewal finally faded into the night, Thebes stood transformed not just by revived traditions or gleaming canals, but by the shared heartbeat of its people. In every street, in every home, the memory of that day carried on in children's songs, in farmers' hymns to Ra at dawn, and in the steady hum of artisans at their looms. Nebmatra and Tai looked out once more over the gentle ripples of the Nile, knowing that the true test of leadership lay not in grand ceremonies alone, but in the quiet moments when a single song could bind 1,000 hearts. And so, under the watchful gaze of the stars, Egypt settled into a new rhythm, an eternal chorus of unity, hope, and renewal that would carry its spirit forward into every tomorrow. And that, dear listeners, is the end of the epic tale of Pharaoh Nebmatra, ruler who built not just a kingdom of power, but a legacy of love, wisdom, and the united voice of his people. May this story remind us that true strength doesn't lie in thrones or crowns, but in hearts that are willing to listen and souls brave enough to lead with kindness. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next journey. Type in the comments and tell us which part of the story touched you the most. Until the next tale, thank you for listening. Good night, and may your dreams